Good afternoon, everybody. I'm your host, Crystal. This is another edition of the 9 o'clock Meltdown podcast. And over phone, I have Rafael Swing.
Xuan Wing Chun.
Yes, there we go. Or for us, really dumb Americans, Wing Chun. Let's kind of dive in. Now, Rafael, I actually ended up seeing one of your posters up at a local coffee shop. And I was very intrigued. I've always kind of been intrigued by the martial arts and things like that as a kid of the 80s and 90s. You know, it was everywhere. Vin Diesel did it. The Matrix had it in there. Just a bunch of...
That part in the Matrix where he's like, I know Kung
Fu. Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. So I've always been intrigued by that kind of fighting style. You know, Bruce Lee was a really big influence in the early 70s and 80s and things like that. And then he influenced many others from that as well.
Yes, and Bruce Lee is very much part of the popularity of Wing Chun, because Wing Chun is what Bruce Lee studied before he created his own martial art later.
All right. Very cool. So anyway, I saw a poster of yours, I reached out, and I actually took one of your classes as well, a more kind of personal class. Yeah, I mean, you're a fabulous teacher. Very relaxed atmosphere, very personable. You know, I think one of the things that I enjoyed was you were like, okay, can I touch the small of your back? Here, let me help you reposition, blah, blah. And I think that's just a sign of the times as well, but that was very honorable in a way. But but let's dive into your teaching style. You have a master as well who taught you. Let's just dive right in.
Okay, so what exactly do you want to know?
Let's just start from the beginning. How did you and your master connect?
Sure. Okay. Yeah. So. Yeah, I guess I'll talk a bit about my own journey into martial arts.
Yes, please.
I also thought martial arts were pretty cool. But I was not very as a kid. I was not very into sports. I wasn't very familiar with my body, and it was kind of the end of high school. I actually got mugged.
Ooh.
Me and a few of my friends were hanging out in a park, and which was like my home park in my home city. I grew up around the corner, and I never had any problems in this park before. And a slightly larger group of sort of guys of maybe even younger than us, I'm not sure, basically just sort of jumped us from behind and demanded all our stuff, and none of us had really any money. But we left our wallets, and as they left, one of the guys sucker punched me. Ooh. And I have very distinctly, even now, remember seeing this punch coming and having no reaction, just seeing it coming and just getting hit in the face. And next thing you knew, I was on my ass on the ground, and that was definitely a motivating factor. After that, I asked a friend of mine, what should if I want to do if I want to learn how to defend myself, what should I do? And this friend of mine had done karate for a really long time, and so he recommended a few ideas, and I eventually found an Aikido place. And I did that for a couple summers. So I did it for that summer, but I was leaving the city for college, so I wasn't able to keep going at that place. And Aikido is a really nice martial art that teaches you how to do rolls and break falls. And so it has a lot of throws and wrist locks and arm locks. And it's very non-violent, which at the time was also very appealing to me. Mm-hmm. But then in college, I couldn't find any Aikido. So I was like, well, I got to do something else, I suppose. And I found another martial art. And this one is called Haedong Gumdo, which is a Korean sword martial art.
Ooh.
So I did that martial art for my entire time in college, 7 years, and was a really good way of that martial art has a lot of these low stances and spins and turns, and it looks really cool. You feel really badass doing it, and it was like really good exercise for me. You know, you spend all this time and you realize you're not, you know, everything helps. You know, you get more into your body, you have more familiar with even using a weapon. It helps you understand connection to some degree, and you're certainly better off in a fight than nothing. But you're not actually practicing like just open hand defending yourself if you're stuck out, you know. So I was still looking for more, and at the time, you know, in college, there's college clubs were all free with tuition, so I was looking through there, and I found this guy teaching some kung fu. You know, and I had my own idea of like, like Shaolin Kung Fu or what you see in the movies, and you know, I was interested. I took this guy's class, and he was, what I didn't know yet was that he had done a sort of the generic Kung Fu, and I say generic Kung Fu, but there's no really such thing. So Kung Fu means Chinese martial arts, or at least it's come to mean that. The original word for Kung Fu actually just means learned skill.
Oh.
So traditionally, you would say like a chef who's really, really good. He has good Kung Fu. You would say like a bricklayer or any skilled profession. You would say they have good Kung Fu. So actually, this comes to Bruce Lee again. You know, Bruce Lee says he has good Kung Fu. He meant good skill. Practice skill, something he practiced over and over and over again. And so the West sort of started taking it as meaning martial art, and eventually it's actually shifted back, and even in Chinese now, it's understood to often mean martial art. Originally, it didn't mean that. Originally, there's lots of different styles of Kung Fu. China is a huge place, and in fact, there's in different regions of China, there's many, many different languages. A lot of them are are slowly dying, unfortunately, and sort of being replaced by Mandarin. But there are still a lot of languages, and as such, there are tons of different styles of Kung Fu, and even more because often a family would have their own style that they would sort of keep secret. And so you would have these family styles of Kung Fu that they would keep within their family. And that's changed a lot, but that's sort of where the tradition came from. And so people talk about Shaolin Kung Fu for that the monks practiced, and they had the different styles, and you know, there are tons, or were tons. He had this teacher I found in my college. He had practiced what was generic Kung Fu because his teacher was teaching bits of lots of different styles, right? And so he was learning this, and then my Sifu of Wing Chun moved to his town, and he went to just a couple of his classes to check it out, and he was totally converted to Wing Chun. When I met this guy, he was starting this college club after training with my Sifu for just 2 summers.
Oh, wow.
2 full 4-month summers. And this is one of the really cool things about the way this Wing Chun is taught, is that it gets you up. You learn the basics fast. It really changes the way you practice. So when I started training in this, I immediately, you know, just a few classes, I was also very, very converted. I could see how everything was really useful. I could see how I was doing exercises that were making me more stable, more grounded. I could see how this was useful, how this position would protect me more than another position. And then I really saw the benefit of you focus in on one style. It's designed for you to practice it, where you make these movements that seem awkward at first. You make these movements eventually muscle memory, and all of these movements work well together. So once you have all these little movements as muscle memory, when you're actually connected to somebody and sparring, you start flowing from one movement to the next, and one movement doesn't have to follow another movement. Any of the other movements can follow it. It's just, you need to move into this to protect yourself in this way, and my muscle memory has a position that defends that area really well. Yeah. So, and eventually I met my now Sifu because he would come to the club and give like a seminar, and it's just, you practice with my club, my Wing Chun brothers and sisters in that class, and you get a feel like how good each of them are. My instructor was really good, and I would really like sparring him. But the moment that I touched hands with my Sifu, you could tell he's a master. He feels like a rock, and yet he's like soft water at the same time. Like, he's a small Asian man, and like he could easily push me over, and just ease, he can touch hands with you. He can close your eyes. He can close his eyes once he's touching your hands, and all he needs is the feeling. He can trap your arms, show you where you're vulnerable to a strike right to the face. He wouldn't actually hit you, but you get to this certain level of comfort where, like, you can. Once you've been training for a while, you get to a certain level of comfort where you'll hit each other on the chest, places where it can, it doesn't hurt, and but you can start feeling, there's power behind that, and and it's just one of those things. You talk to other people who do kung fu, and they'll talk about touching hands, and that means that it's the kind of the very nice way of saying sparring, right? But there's a bit more of a control to it. You're not just trying to knock each other out. But people will talk about touching hands, and you can immediately tell when somebody has skill when you touch hands. And there's something to there's just something to it. And once you find somebody who really has it, it's so apparent. And it was after that, every opportunity I could train with my Sifu directly, I took it. And eventually I was in a position where, like, every month I was doing like an overnight trip to his place, where I would arrive in the evening, join his group class, train with him, train like an hour private afterwards, and then in the morning after breakfast we would do another couple hours of training, and then I would head home. It was great. And eventually my Sifu organized this trip to China, and he has students scattered around the world because he's lived around the world, and he's a really cool guy. He knows like four languages fluently at least, and so he organized this trip to China with the goal of it being like a training trip where anyone who was one of his students around the world could join. We visited this area in the Yunnan province, which is a western province that borders Tibet. And there's a town there called Lijiang. The town has a lot of its like original like architecture from like sort of ancient China, basically, which is not common in China. A lot of old stuff was destroyed during the communist revolution, and they call it the Cultural Revolution, which happened a bit later, where they purged. The young people were incited to purge a lot of old things, but it didn't. That kind of was more Eastern China, and the Western China was kind of left alone because it wasn't developed very much yet, and so you still had people living like they had lived for hundreds and hundreds of years. So eventually, anyway, so I'm getting a little sidetracked here, but okay. We visited this like town where my Sifu's father was from, and it was just surreal. We met a couple of his distant relatives, and our Sifu was acting as a translator while we would wake up in the morning. He would have us all train and spar with each other, and I learned so. It was a month of this trip, and I progressed so much during that trip. It was incredible. I really feel lucky, and you get to a point where the word Sifu means teacher father. So if I say it correctly in Mandarin, it would sound like Shifu, teacher father. So there's an extra layer. So if you just say teacher in Mandarin, it's Lao Shi. Shifu is this extra layer, which implies a sort of a familial relationship. So you get to this point where your teacher is another father figure for you. Mm-hmm. I feel really lucky to have been able to foster that relationship and to have learned what I learned, and I really would like to share it and start and teach more. So I'm really pushing right now for that.
Yeah, fabulous. Rafael, I can tell the passion and the excitement that you have in your voice, talking about your experience and what you've learned, and sharing that knowledge with people. When I took my lesson, I could definitely tell that there was a lot of passion there. So it's really cool that you've found something that you can really gravitate to, and something that really speaks to you as a person. Now, if we can take a quick little side tangent,
Sure.
Kung Fu, as I use bunny quotes here, Kung Fu is not the only thing that you teach. You're also an avid sailor as well.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, so I would say those two things are my two biggest passions, and in fact, I'd say my life is more revolving around sailing than it does Kung Fu or Wing Chun. Mm-hmm. And some of that's practicality, because it's really hard to make a living teaching with martial arts. It is very, very difficult. Yeah, so sailing. Yeah, I also just started teaching some sailing. I really love taking people out on the water and teaching sailing as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Very cool. How did you get started in that? Was that just kind of something that you did as a kid?
No, yeah, I actually got into it also in college. I mean, I did do it a little bit as a kid, but mostly at like a summer camp. So I was part of Scouts growing up and went to the same summer camp most summers. And they would have a few little sailing dinghies. It was on a small lake, and small lakes have this tendency to like not have a lot of wind because they're very tree protected. Mm. So I remember going out a lot of times being like, well, this is boring. There's no wind. And then you get out one time and there's a lot of wind and you don't really know what's going on, but sometimes the boat moves really well and you're like, wow, this is really fun. It's moving and I'm not paddling at all. I'm not doing any work. Yeah, and I kind of just like I knew that it was something that I would like more, and if I could have an opportunity to do it more. Mm-hmm. So in college, I sort of sought it out a bit, and I found they also had a club there. The college I went to is right on Lake Ontario in Kingston, Ontario, and which is actually a really great sailing spot because that's the eastern end of Lake Ontario, and they get the westerly wind just sort of funnels along the lake, so they get a lot of consistent wind, even windier than here in Duluth, if you can believe it. Yeah, so I joined the club and got to go out they had dinghies as well, and got to go on that more. But I was looking at these big boats, and I had these, just started getting sort of infected with this dream of, well, can't I just like do big trips and sail around the world or live on a boat? And so I was like, well, how do I get on one of those bigger boats? And my path was that the local yacht club, which was partnered with the school for that other sailing, had a adult learn to sail course that if you took it, you could get certified for the yacht club to take out some of their they had these 24-foot boats called sharks. You could take them out on your own, or well, usually with somebody else, but you could skipper them, which means you're in charge, you lead it. And so I did that, and I quickly learned that the best, the cheapest way to sail is you just meet people who need crew, and you crew for free. So I started racing so that I could get experience sailing. I did that for a couple summers, and I eventually did this trip to the Caribbean. And again, it was just looking for crew. I found a spot on this boat that was going to head south from Port Smith, Virginia, to Tortola, the British Virgin Islands, and I got aboard that boat. After I graduated, I had this trip planned and got on the boat and went down to British Virgin Islands, and then I had a few months of doing some deckhand work here or there. I worked for I got supply company for a bit. I just was trying to get work with around and on boats to sort of lengthen my stay, and I was able to stay down there for pretty much the entire winter. And then, and then I came back because the private yacht industry down there is it's a little corrupt. There's a lot of money. Corrupt's maybe not the right word. It's just how our society works. Just lots of money, and it passes between people with money, and the local people without money don't see it. And then as a deckhand, you're kind of feeding off of the money. And I just didn't want to be part of that anymore.
Yeah.
And so I went home, and eventually I moved to Duluth, and that's kind of its own story, but eventually I moved to Duluth, and one of the things that brought me here was that Duluth has like a really good sailing community and culture. Since being here, I also crew on race boats, and now I have my own little 22-foot boat that I'm currently painting, and which is a really big job, but will hopefully be done in a couple weeks, and then that'll go back in the water, and I'll be able to take people out sailing and, just give little lessons to friends, and eventually I'll get my captain's license, which will take a while because you need a whole bunch of long sea hours, but eventually I'll get my captain's license, and then I'll be able to officially teach for pay sailing on larger boats. So right now I'm teaching for little out of the DSSA, which is the Duluth Superior Sailing Association, which is located on Park Point. And I just started working there, and there you can I'm teaching out of the little sailing dinghies. So that you don't need a captain's license for. You get this other certification, which I just got. Yeah, so I'm teaching there, and eventually I'll be teaching on larger boats too. But bit by bit,
Yeah, definitely. Rafael, you're this wealth of knowledge and worldly views and things like that. I never knew that you went down to the British Virgin Islands and basically kind of lived down there for a while. That's very cool.
Yeah.
Very awesome to hear. Not a lot of people get those opportunities. And also, not a lot of people get the opportunity to go to China as well. That's really...
That was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
Yeah.
I knew that my Sifu was like, I'm getting old, and I don't really want to organize these trips anymore. Instead, he prefers for students to organize a trip for him to come to them. And then he doesn't have to do all... it was a lot of work for him, that China trip. I mean, he planned the whole thing, reached out to relatives and old friends, and was a translator the whole time. And then teaching us. Just wow, it was just an incredible once in a lifetime trip. I mean, I'm just so grateful I got to do that.
Yes, that sounds absolutely amazing. And I'm really grateful that you're up here and you're accessible, and now me and other people can finally learn some Kung Fu.
Yeah. Awesome.
And now, knowing what Kung Fu actually means, I want to use it in the correct terminology, but I guess it's kind of adapted into its own little entity, so maybe I am using it correctly, but...
Yeah, so it's still correct, because the point that Bruce Lee was making was that, it's not just this talent that I have. It was a learned skill, a practiced, learned skill. So it is Kung Fu. It's just actually a larger umbrella word than most people in the West realize.
Yeah. I think that's really cool. Actually, I was talking to another artist in town, Claire Cooley and Bodie Warner, and I just brought it up to them during our interview, that I'm trying to change the word talent in my mind, that talent is not something that you're born with and something that you're automatically good with. Talent is something that is learned and practiced at and worked upon, and then that's how you get talent. It's
Right.
practice. So that's kind of cool.
That is Kung Fu. That is Kung Fu.
Yes. Yeah, that's really cool that there's already a term for it and already a word.
Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. So, yeah, I'm trying to change that, talent, and now I get to add Kung Fu to my repertoire as well. See, you learn something new every day.
Yes.
Wonderful. So, Rafael, if somebody's interested in taking a sailing lesson with you or practice Wing Chun, how can they do that?
Okay, so for sailing, I'll just direct everyone to just contact the DSSA. And they have a website. If you go right down to the Park Point, even if you come during hours when they're not open, there's some brochures you can take down right, and you could ask for me if you would like. But I am one of the newest instructors there, so I'll direct people to that. And for Wing Chun, I am currently just started to do pop-up classes at the Superior YMCA. So that's one option. And then finally, if you want to reach directly to me, you can get me at my email, which is DuluthXWingChun@gmail.com.
All right. Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, Rafael, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to talk with me and the wider world about Wing Chun, boat sailing, and just life experience in general. That's absolutely amazing that you're teaching now. You're teaching sailing, and you're also teaching at the YMCA. Yes,
Yeah.
and I will see you very soon for our next lesson. That's perfect.
Great.
Yes.
Great.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
Have a wonderful day.